Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
I'm doing. I'm recovering from our trip.
Yeah, we had a little trip this weekend.
You know, we usually don't talk about political parties, and we don't talk a whole lot about politics, but of course you can't avoid it because, you know, politicians again tend to be our nemesis.
Yeah.
We have to alert people. But this was a little bit different because both of us attended the Libertarian Party convention. And there, if anybody knows about it, and I'm sure some of our audience knows and keeps tabs of it, both positive and negative. But I think in a way the party must be maturing. They're having inside fights, you know.
Yeah.
Originally when it started, there were so few, there weren't any fights. But no, there was at least a contest. I don't even know. We didn't see the fighting. They were all on their best behavior, you know. But it was a big deal because, because the party, there was one part of the party was sort of their personal moral standards, and I don't know whether this is saying something wrong, it was a little bit different than others.
Yeah.
And so the Mises Caucus was created, and of course I kept tabs on that, and you were interested in it, which is a good indication that they're going to emphasize Austrian free market economics, and somebody we look up to. So that was, they were working hard because they thought their faction was stronger than the other, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
It showed that the Mises Caucus and the attitude they were expressing was superior to the people in charge, and it has changed. So I thought it was a positive weekend. I was glad to have been invited there, and I didn't have to get into any squabbles. Of course, I didn't get into the nitty-gritty squabbles because I wasn't significant enough in the Republican Party, you know, as far as the management of the party goes. But so I'm strictly interested in the ideas, and this is ideological too. And you can't hide from the fact that the caucus that took over was the Mises Caucus. You know, so anybody who knows about Mises should feel pleased about it. But overall, I thought it was a nice event. There was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of support for liberty.
Yeah, there was, and thanks to our good friend James McMahon who took us out to Reno to attend the event. You know, I know you're a modest person, but you gave a barn burner of a speech there that night, and it was the crowd was very excited. And as you point out, and we can actually, well, I don't want to give it away. We'll do it in a second. But as you point out, there were a couple of factions fighting. And Michael Heiss, he deserves the credit. I mean, it's hard to organize. I'm sure organizing in the LP is like herding cats, you know, herding cats that I don't know what. So he apparently, and this is according to an article, we'll put up the headline now, and I didn't realize this, but what motivated Heiss to start the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party was his frustration and anger over people like Bill Weld being the top nominees, people who were not by any stretch libertarian. They weren't anti-war, they weren't Austrian, they were nothing, and they were nobodies. And you have people like Sarwark, who hated your guts for all these years, Kyle Werner, whatever his name is, who was pro-war. All these people were just holding on to the party, and Heiss, from nothing, really created this caucus of young people that are getting a little older now, who are in the 08 and 12 campaigns of yours and inspired by that. And this kind of coalition now came together, and here's the result that over the weekend. There was the big conventions. Put up that first clip, and we'll see what it was. Reason and Doherty, of course, he had to put all of his stuff in there about the negative things about the Mises Caucus. You know, some people say they're bad people. Whatever, okay. Mises Caucus takes control of the Libertarian Party. They got their own chairwoman elected. She gave, I think, a very impressive speech. She looks to be a great organizer, and I think she just struck the right tone. I'm not interested in politics, but I enjoy talking to the people. I know that you enjoyed them. We were well received. Our friends Dave Smith, Tom Woods, Scott Horton brought the show together, and I just thought it was a good event. It's nice to see them explicitly embracing the Ron Paul view of war and of economics, and if that makes headway, and if they're able to, to organize properly and to put out a platform that really puts this into play, I think it's something to be interested and exciting about.
You know, in some ways, they don't have competition. If you're looking at changing the world, I mean, Republicans and Democrats aren't going to move in this direction. And here there's the so-called split with the Libertarians. But now this group that we talk to really have a lot of responsibility, you know, to pursue with the ideological fight, because, you know, I think that's much more important than just the strategy and the money and all these kind of things. So that is where I think we're making some progress, and the opportunity is just tremendous. I mean, everything is getting really, and sometimes you can use vulgarity, really messed up. It's really messed up.
Yeah.
And so the economy's a mess. Social standards are a mess. COVID was a mess. War is messier. And think about the budget and the financial thing. You know, last night I was trying to find out if there were any friends from my campaigns. So they stole my line before I got there, and it was end the Fed, end the Fed.
Oh, yeah,
and it's that
strong.
kind of stuff that is important. So it to me was very, very exciting. But you know, this is Memorial Day, and you know, this is a day that there will be a lot of flags flying.
Yeah.
And there was a time when I looked at Memorial Day automatically, but early on it was mainly, you know, summer has begun. I'm out of school. I'm going to get to take my shoes and socks off and go barefoot for the rest of summer, you know, and go swimming. So that is that. But today, and it has changed, and there's been some good libertarian writers that have been very, very tough and very emphatic about how ugly this has turned, because it's what they're really celebrating is militarism.
Yeah.
And of course, the one thing that gets stuck in the middle are the dedicated, well-meaning, pro-American people who are enticed for sometimes just financial reasons. They get it in the Army or the reserves and all, and suffer a lot of consequences. And it's a militarism that is designed, I believe, because it's the biggest in the world and we dominate NATO and all. It's not only, you know, the patriotic thing, you know, issue for us in America, but it's really the militarism of our empire. And I don't know whether that's overstated or not, but I see that, and I think people realize that. So I literally weep when I see the people who have died and injured and still walk around for these wars, and then here we find that George Bush's heart was never even in it, and he's letting the truth out now about exactly what his foreign policy was like. So that to me is sad, but there's no reason. You know, the subject came up during the campaign, and it was, well, we can't leave.
Yeah.
And you know, LBJ, when he got in, he says, well, I can't be the first president to lose a war. We can't, and another one said, we can't save face, Ron, we gotta go in. And I said, you know, if you, and they would use the word, we can't let people have died in vain. If you walk away, they died in vain. And I say, no, there is one way, the only way that I know that I can say that the suffering has occurred not in vain, that it wakes people up and they start listening. Do we really have to have a violent interventionist foreign policy that dictates that a president can go to war without even a declaration? Now that to me would be a real success and something to celebrate, and we should talk about that on Memorial Day just as well as blindly praising every bomb we ever dropped and pretend that we're on the holy side of all the wars.
Yeah. Well, let's put up this next clip then, because this shows it all really in many ways. And you can go there, and I've been to Arlington Cemetery, and I think it's a very sobering place to go to see so many people that have died in wars needlessly. And you're right about Vietnam. I know you've talked a lot about Korea, but every single war from then on, including Iraq and the wasted 20 years in Afghanistan, all the ridiculous less than war operations around the world, each time the idea is, oh, well, we learned from that one, we learned our lessons from that one, They haven't learned a single lesson because they're just as susceptible to propaganda, as we see, and we'll talk in a second about Ukraine, just as susceptible to propaganda, just as susceptible to the media. Washington is just as susceptible to the lies and the outright criminality of the military-industrial complex and how they capture retired military officers, retired intelligence professionals, and put them on television saying, we got to do this, we got to do that and the other. Haven't learned a darn thing, and it's enough to get a little bit angry on Memorial Day, and we wish that people would, as you say, be more sober. Look at those graves. Look at these and think of each one of these being a family of people whose, sadly enough, relatives died for absolutely nothing.
You know, and the men that have suffered bump into the Americans, and I think many Americans are torn because they're patriotic and they think of World War II and they think of Hitler and all these things, and they see it in different terms, and they would, I think, have some second thoughts. I think they have second thoughts, and one of the things they do to sort of neutralize that, because deep down in their heart, I think a lot of the militancy, they're saying, you know, why have we done that? And you know what I think they use is when they see a person in military, and this is ritualistic, and they even tell you to do it. If you see somebody that is a veteran, or you know he's a veteran, thank him for his service. And it was something that I understood it, and I wasn't angry about it, but I was so disappointed thinking that somebody wanting to be very nice and kind to me and represent what America is all about, to thank me for participating. And all I could think of, I wonder how many physicals I did. There was a big move on when I was in the military. A lot of warrant officers from the Army, they couldn't wait, you know, to get a helicopter and go to Vietnam. And I keep thinking, you know, I was in the middle of that, and I thought, I don't feel good about it. I don't feel like I'm a better American for this, and unfortunately that is the case. So a lot of people, and maybe even now, they're starting to think about it. Hopefully these few indications that some people are getting tired of Ukraine. If they could only be changing their mind for good reasons, but we would encourage them to change their mind and look at the right reasons for changing their mind, and they shouldn't feel guilt for changing their mind. They should feel good about admitting maybe we went in the wrong direction. But that's what happened after 20 years. They wouldn't admit that we shouldn't be. We're still there. I think we have 1,400 soldiers still in Afghanistan. So it's interventionism, and it's an unholy thing to do, and then pretend that we're not interested in empire. We're interested in, you know, the great American experiment.
Yeah, it's always got a noble cause. We're going to support democracy. We're going to support,
and the Constitution.
And the Constitution. You know, as I mentioned in my speech on Friday night at the Mises caucus, every war is built on a mountain of lies. And if we could just get one point across, they're lying. Everything they say is a lie. Don't believe anything they say, even if it's convincing. But we'll move on. We hinted about Ukraine, and let's put on that next clip, because this theme of our next segment really is how the mainstream media itself is now begrudgingly, far too late for our taste, admitting what people like Colonel McGregor, Larry Johnson, and many others with actual military experience have said all along, which is that this war was lost from day one. We can actually keep that up. Was lost from day one. All the propaganda about the plucky Ukrainians and defending their democracy was BS. It was all about selling weapons. It was all about the military-industrial complex. So here we have Stars and Stripes, a very establishment publication, reprinting a Washington Post article, Ukraine suffers on battlefield while pleading for U.S. arms. And this is just one in many headlines. New York Times, I think, had something today. They've had something in the past. Paper after paper now is reporting, even The Guardian is reporting that things are going extremely badly. And in fact, on the ronpaulinstitute.org website, we have an article from our friend Patrick Henningsen, who talks about they may be losing Vietnam-level numbers of soldiers in just a couple of months that took us 10 years to lose. So it's a big deal. They're losing big time. But guess what? They're still demanding more U.S. weapons, even for what they're begrudgingly saying a lost cause. And I said this in the speech too, Dr. Paul, because they always do this. They did it in the mid-2000s. Well, I guess Iraq wasn't such a great idea, but no one saw that coming. Did you listen to Ron Paul and Walter Jones later and the others? No, they didn't.
Yeah, sad. You know, they talk about, and you have to talk about it to point out what's happening on strategy. You know, the losses that occur on the military strategy, the dollars spent, and these are all the results. But then that is important because hopefully that will change people's mind. But the real issue is the avoidance of following the law, which is the Constitution, which the founders felt very strongly about, and they did not want it to be put into the hands of one individual. And but it is in the hands of one individual. I mean, and to me, and I wasn't very old when Truman made the decision. And he made a decision to go into Korea, and it was right after, I guess maybe the Second World War was still in mind. That well, we got to start it. We've got to take care of it. But you know, he's the one that signed us up. Oh, well, we'll get our authority from the UN resolution. And even Bush in the later years, you know, when people pester him about authority, he even said bluntly, I don't get authority from you. I get the authority from the United Nations. So this is, and the one thing they'll do right now is a move more so than ever, and at least it says, and that is American ground troops aren't in there, but they are in there. They're just not getting involved and letting somebody else die for this. So there's been a lot of mistakes, but basically it was the immorality of not following the guidance. Well, first, the guidance of the higher law that says you shouldn't start wars, and the second one is that's implanted in our Constitution, and we ignore it, and few people complain about it. Yeah, and I hopefully think there's more now than there used to be, and there are days when I think that the people who are understanding what we're saying, I think the numbers are growing. But we need people awakened, but we need them to be awakened to what liberty is all about and what non-intervention means.
And when we warned from the beginning, and you did it in several columns, that this was a terrible idea, we shouldn't get involved in this. Of course, you're accused of being a Putin apologist, you're pro-Russia. This is talking points from the Russian playbook, right? So now, belatedly, they have to admit that you were right all along. You don't get any rewards for being right. But the danger is still very, very high. And the second part of that article that we put up just now was they're clamoring for more weapons. And what they want are long-range artillery rocket launchers, and those are rockets that can penetrate deeply into Russia itself if used in that way. And you say, well, Ukraine wouldn't be that crazy, Kiev wouldn't be that crazy to fire into Moscow. Well, that may not be the case. And depending on whether or not this is true, and admittedly this is RT, so you have to bring all the biases of RT into it. But let's put up this next clip. And this is disturbing because the U.S. has been sending in some pretty heavy artillery already. And this is 5 killed by Ukrainian shelling of schools and residential buildings in Donetsk. And it says Kiev may have used U.S. supplied artillery to attack the capital city. Again, it's RT. They have it. They have an agenda. Everyone has an agenda. But I've seen some pictures of this. If this is correct, that they're using our howitzers, which is what is claimed in this, to attack civilians in there, that does bring us closer to war with Russia unnecessarily. It's not going to save any lives for us to get further involved. It's not going to make it go any more quickly to get us more involved. And this cry for these long-range rockets, the danger is still there, Dr. Paul.
The PR wouldn't be there, but to make a declaration that the war is already going and NATO started it, that will eventually come out. But this is, if they don't admit that, this thing will just continue to go on, and you're like you say, they're just going to we need more weapons that we need, and they do if they think they're going to win. But it was the fact that they're not going to win, and there's going to be a lot more people die. But I think you could put up a pretty good moral case. and a legal case that we are at war. Because even though our soldiers aren't on the ground, they're the advisors, and it's the American people's money, it's our weapons, it's the military-industrial complex that motivates all the spending, and I think the fact that we have done this, if conditions were such that it was necessary, I think people could make a just cause and say that we are at war. And eventually, who knows what the transition will be, but eventually we'll get punished for it, if we haven't been punished already.
Yeah.
I think the punishment's ongoing, but I'm talking about when they attack us, because, the things that we do with sanctions and bombs and all this activity, the American people don't understand what we're really involved in, but the people who are on the receiving end of our policies, I don't think they'll forget quickly.
As our friend Caitlin Johnstone, who spoke at one of our conferences a few years ago, she pointed out very well, and I was looking for the tweet and I couldn't find it, so I'll paraphrase it. She was anticipating what those would say about a negotiated settlement, when she's saying, but if there's a negotiated settlement, then Putin will get to keep all of his spoils. And her response in the tweet was, oh, okay, well, let's go ahead and keep the war going until the last Ukrainian is dead. That's a better option than maybe trying to save a few lives.
Yeah, they never think about the other option.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just think about, being the delivery of the option of just why we shouldn't give the land to the Russians.
But like Boris Johnson sitting there now, he's got all of his scandals. He's in deep trouble at home, and he's the one cheerleading. Keep going, boys, keep going, as he's sitting there with his wine and cheese party. So it's a lot easier for him to say that. We know that Raytheon, by the way, over the weekend we talked about this. They just got a contract for $600 and some million because we gave Ukraine all of our missiles, and now they're saying, "All right, this
they're
war
not
stuff."
crying, are
Yeah.
they? Oh, we're under greater threat than ever. Yes, we are for our bankruptcy and the attack on our civil liberties here at home. I want to move on if you.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean the drumbeat continues. We can put the next one up.
This is interesting because traditionally, as long as I can remember, I thought of Heritage as a conservative group and really friendly toward Republicans, but from a Libertarian view, they had a deep flaw, and that was that they were hawks, super hawks, and they were subsidized by a lot of military industrial complex companies. But and they've been they have not been bashful about what we should be doing in Ukraine, except now that the attitude is changing. I don't know whether this is because their side's not doing well and they're sort of backing away. But anyway, the article from Zero Hedge says historically hawkish Heritage hits the brakes on Ukraine aid. I mean, up until now it was more and more aid, and they had clout because it was Republican too, and but it would be interesting to see how the hawkish Republicans will handle Heritage, but Heritage has carved out a little spot for them for a while. We're not changing our position of joining those non-interventionists.
No.
We still want to do that, but we better be cautious because this might get out of hand. And it costs a lot of money because they're fiscal conservative.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, this is where Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, and all the other ones who voted against this aid, they took some hard body blows on the days of those votes, hard ones. But eventually, as with the Ron Paul Dr. No votes, eventually they will be proven right, and we're seeing it unfold before our eyes when even Heritage, funded by the war machine, realizes it's too politically risky to keep cheerleading for this war. And let's put that Zero Hedge headline up. Let's go back one, please, if we can. There we go. Historically hawkish Heritage hits the brakes on Ukraine aid. And here's what Heritage wrote. And if you remember, Dr. Paul, they did have to change their top leadership at Heritage. And I don't know if this reflects that change in leadership. And if so, then we should be cautiously optimistic. But here's what they said in a statement in May when these bills were up. This proposed Ukraine aid package takes money away from the priorities of the American people and recklessly sends our taxpayer dollars to a foreign nation without any accountability. That's a reference to Rand Paul's view. America is struggling with record-setting inflation, debt, a porous border, crime, and energy depletion, yet progressives in Washington are prioritizing a $40 billion aid package to Ukraine. This is political. The statement is political. And in a sense, I'm happy to hear it because what they're trying to do is hint, Republicans, you're on the verge of doing really well, and we are a Republican think tank. If you would stop this cheerleading and realize this is a political albatross on the neck of the Democrats, use this for the campaign in November, and you will have success. I think that's what they're trying to frame by putting it this way. We happen to agree with it, and we'll take a win wherever we can get it. But we have to think about how stupid the Republicans were to do the Me Too on all of this spending.
I wonder if you could make a comparison to the problems that the liberal Democrats have faced, because they thought it was just great. The country's fallen apart with lawlessness and killing in our streets and are burning down. And what do the Democrats propose? Defund the police.
Yeah.
And that hasn't gone over so well. Sometimes people want to have a policeman out there calming things down, but in a way they've had to back off from that a little bit. I mean, not that they're not going to change their philosophy, but it finally became so stupid, and that's maybe a little bit of this that's going on. To have to go out and campaign, maybe there'll be some good people looking at an anti-war position, but it's not going to come from the progressive Democrats.
Yeah.
And we need more, people. If you're going to see more change, I think it's going to be more practical to have more libertarian types, working in the Republican Party to try to change them, because it's so disappointing about what the progressives have morphed into.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders, for example, had such a reputation. He's pro-blue collar, he's for the working people, working class. Well, he marched down that aisle and voted to send $40 billion of the working class money over to Ukraine to buy war weapons. So you're right, it's an incredible opportunity for Republicans. And trust me, we're not pro-Republicans, but it's a great opportunity for them to redefine their message. And I think the zeitgeist is moving in our direction. Redefine your message against these ridiculous military adventures. Maybe we're just, I don't know, sniffing glue over here or something. Yeah. But let's skip over and go to our last topic, because we're running a little bit long here. It's probably my fault, Dr. Paul. But this is about sanctions. Sanctions, we've talked about it. You've talked about it for a lot of years. They don't seem to work that well. Sometimes they backfire. Let's put up this one about oil. Here we go. This is from oilprice.com via Zero Hedge. Russia sends record volumes of oil to India and China.
You talk about things backfiring on them. In a way, there's no real capitalists out there, believing in the free market. But some of the things are more capitalistic, and the others are more socialistic. But here we're doing these things that so often all this spending of money and printing of money and doing these things is more socialistic. And then you take a country like Russia, and of course we like to paint them as the communists, and you can't trust them at all, and the Chinese as well. As far as running their financial thing, they tend to earn money right now, especially. All this stuff about trying to destroy Russia, they're coming up making more money, and at the cost of whom? Our consumers. They should say, what are you paying for gasoline? Oh, some places $6, $6 a gallon. So it is really just crazy. But right now, I'm going to say, wish American people would wake up. But I'm going to say, American people are waking up. They're getting sick and tired of this, and maybe they'll speak out and find the right kind of people to support in the election.
Well, the irony is all these sanctions on Russia, as you say, they've driven the price of oil through the roof, natural gas through the roof. Literally, the U.S. and the EU are financing the Russian war against Ukraine. They're
right.
Literally financing the war. I mean, how's that for unintended consequences? Maybe Putin's playbook is penetrating deeper, but it's just amazing. Germany, for example, and in all of Europe, committed economic suicide for 2 years during COVID. They literally shot themselves in the head, destroying their economy. And now this comes around, and Biden and his lackeys say, hey, we want you to do some more. Kill yourself a little more. And they say, okay, let's do some of that. Let's destroy the economy. And there's really only
They cut off the pipeline.
Cut off the pipeline, cut off your head, everything. There's only one country, and it was my home through the 1990s, Hungary, that has on very many issues a great political leadership right now. They said no. And he said, this is the equivalent of an atomic weapon going off on our economy if we cut off all of this oil from Russia, and we're just not going to do it. And on these issues, it requires unanimity among EU members, and Hungary has held fast. And you can bet there are a lot of arm twisting, a lot of knives in the back for Orban and his government, but they have, to their credit to this point, said, no, we are not going to back down from this. It's just not going to happen. And so that gives a little bit of life left to Europe, but that's, no credit to the leaders of the EU.
All that we're talking about now is not propping up the ultimate value of the dollar, and it's a challenge to the dollar being the reserve currency of the world. And just recently, the Russians and the Chinese, were quite ready to have an exchange. They didn't use dollars. They wouldn't use dollars because we wouldn't let them.
Yeah.
And the ruble is not quite that acceptable. They could have done it, but I think they wanted to make a point. So you know what they did? They used gold as a measurement, and they used that's really rocking the boat.
Yeah.
You can't mess around with a government fiat currency, but I think this that might be one of the net values that'll come out of this is dethroning the dollar and actually we getting more interested in sound currency. And of course, you could relate that to that little function we went to over the weekend,
Yeah.
because certainly the Mises caucus at the Libertarian Party would understand something about sound money.
Yeah, you would hope so for sure. Well, I'm going to close out, and I'm going to close first of all with a quote from a Telegram post that I follow, and I've gone more toward Telegram than Twitter because Twitter just keeps banning people. But this, I think Americans that are still drunk on war propaganda should take this on board, and it's a great quote. And I don't remember exactly who posted it, but it's worth thinking about. And this is all facts. Ukraine has not captured or retaken any strategic territory from Russian troops. This comes at a cost of nearly half of the U.S.'s stock of anti-tank missiles and billions of dollars worth of financial aid, mercenaries, 24/7 intel from NATO, and support by literally the entire EU and NATO. Reality is starting to kick in. Despite all of this, they're finally admitting now that it was a losing cause for everyone but the people who profit from it. And finally, just put up our link. This is the last week. We're selling a few more tickets, but our conference is coming on Saturday, Dr. Paul. We've got to think of something good to say. We shouldn't have any problems. The Biden Doctrine, New World Order, or Nuclear Armageddon, Houston, June 4th. There are still tickets, and there are going to be tickets available. We did something different this time. We've got a big old room, and anyone who wants to come can come. So go to ronpaulinstitute.org, and you can still get some tickets if you're in the area and you want to go. The other thing, Dr. Paul, and I'll put this in the description too, and I sent out an update over the weekend. We have our date for the Washington, D.C. conference. It's a big deal. It's going to be September 3rd. It's on Labor Day weekend, the Saturday of Labor Day weekend in Washington, D.C. We've already got a couple of confirmed speakers I'm really happy about. The title of the conference is Anatomy of a Police State. So much to talk about on this topic too. We'll have tickets on sale soon, but just mark that in your calendars. September 3rd, Washington, D.C. It's going to be a great conference.
You mentioned the fact that the Ukrainians are coming, and they want more weapons. They want more money and more weapons, and it's ongoing. But I think weapons are very, very important in war. There's no doubt about it. But sometimes I think confidence in weapons, whoever has the most weapons will always win the war, is just not true. When you think of the British Empire in 1776, they were pretty powerful, and the American colonists weren't very powerful. But the issue was a little bit more than who had the best weapons, and there was a moral argument going on living in a free country and a free society. And amazingly, the war ended where the people with the most weapons didn't win the war. And in a way, this is happening right now. They're claiming that it's, the only thing that can save the Ukrainians now is weapons. Well, they just might not be on the right side. Maybe NATO isn't a trustworthy ally. I think because they can bankrupt the many, like you pointed out about the economy of the Europeans and all, they're getting poorer and poorer, so they're not going to have wealth forever. So this is going to continue, but there's a different war going on, and it's called the moral high ground, and who's defending the homeland. Big issues there, and that determines a whole lot. But a lot of times when the foreign people get involved and come in with their weapons and their promises and be involved, I just don't think it's natural for the people to forever accept the interference of an empire coming 6,000 miles away from their home and getting involved in internal affairs. And you'd think that the Europeans would wake up to why can't we work a little bit better with Russia? It would have been better off from our viewpoint. It would have been better off for the Europeans, but that isn't the case. But we do believe, I strongly endorse the idea that in spite of its imperfection, non-intervention is a great tool because it fits into the principles of liberty, that we should not be initiation force and violence against other individuals or other country, and that free trade and free movement of people is what the founders wanted, and argued the case that the more products and commerce spread among the states and the countries of the world, the less likely there would be a war. And right now they keep saying, well, none of our soldiers are dying in Ukraine, but we might say, how many people are hungrier tonight in America because of the war that's going on, and how much will come? Things are not going to get better. This is not transitory. This is well ingrained, and there's a climactic end coming to this because we can't just print more money. And even the money managers are talking about it too. We just can't keep printing this money. That's a sign that this has to end, and they don't have a solution, because the answer is understanding what true liberty is all about and what it's like to have a sound monetary system. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.